Weekly Download, a podcast about interesting games, industry news.
Brought to you by Big Games Machine.
Hello, and welcome to the first edition of the Weekly Download, brought to you by Big Games Machine, your go-to weekly podcast for the lowdown on the biggest stories in the ever-changing games industry.
From massive mergers and studio shakeups to indie success stories and the latest plays from the biggest studios and developers in the industry, I tell you now, there will be no better place to go if you want to level up your knowledge and stay informed.
Your teammates in this level are myself, Jack, and my trusty co-host, Tom. Fans of the Games PR podcast will recognise us or remember the voices. But for those new, we are two industry experts ready to help you speed run your way through the last week in the world of the video games industry.
To the last week, eh? So what we're going to be talking about? Well, in today's debut episode, we're going to be breaking down Circana's new data on US video game purchasing habits, taking a look at the rising price of consoles and what it could mean for the console ecosystem at large, and taking a look at the freshly announced Assassin's Creed Mirage DLC, which has reportedly been backed by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund. The first story we're looking at today, some really interesting data coming out of Circana, who are a data gatherer. They publish a lot of surveys and a lot of the stuff on video games. And this week they released a really interesting survey, the Future of Video Games survey for the last quarter. And well, it confirms something that I think we've long suspected. I know a lot of other people have. That is essentially industry is heavily reliant on really small parts of its audience to generate most of its revenue. I'll let you chip in soon, Jack, but I'll start off on this bit by just saying, so this data says that 63% of players in the US, so we're looking at the American audience here, but 63% of those players purchased 2 or less games per year, with only 33%, buying a new game less than once a year, which, as gamers ourselves, that feels kind of crazy, and it feels like that's such a large part of the audiences that are just not really engaging with much of the gaming ecosystem.
Yes, I think a lot of it comes down to there's so much talk about wish lists these days, with the goal of somebody putting something on their wish list, putting something on pre-order that they're going to buy down the line. But if that thing costs $70 each time, potentially, how many times are people realistically going to be buying those things? I think we're also in an era where games can take quite a long time to complete. So as someone who has been playing through Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 with some friends, we are barely probably halfway through, just ticking off all the side quests, trying to avoid
in like February,
March. Avoid doing the main story by doing all the side quests. So I think the data makes sense on paper, but games aren't played on paper. They are played on console.
I mean, that's what's really interesting. So you look at like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That's, you know, your AAA $70 game. This data from Circana, when it looks at those games and who's buying those games, essentially it has 14% of players in the US who are called price insensitive players or hyper enthusiasts, and that 14% are the only people who are buying 1 or more new game a month. So that 14% is accounting for a lot of the kind of the foundational spending which we're seeing month on month as new games release.
Hyper enthusiast, I think, is a good term. We're used to hearing the word whale a lot for mobile games, and I think it's the same logic applied. If they are price insensitive, that's because they in their minds have an idea of what they are willing to pay versus not. And I think one of the biggest insights from this data shows that the deluxe editions, and this is something I can speak for, as I prior to recording this week was weighing up, do I pre-order the new Digimon game? Big Digimon fan, have been since a kid. But
You got your
That
deluxe
game,
edition, your premium edition, yeah.
Bandai Namco said, we have like 10 different editions here. It wasn't 10, but you get the point.
Hmm.
And that was getting up into the hundreds of dollars. And I'm sitting there thinking, can I justify that right now? How badly do I want to play this Digimon game? Do I want to spend $100+ on it for content that I'm not even sure I would use if it's cosmetics? So publishers know that those hyper enthusiasts, the stands, if you will buy those games, and so they can charge
and they'll pay for those deluxe
Exactly.
editions. And then you have on the flip side of this, the question of, so that's the 14%. They're the people who are on the regular, buying full price. They're buying deluxe editions for early access and other digital goodies. But for the vast majority, that 63% who are buying 2 or less per year. Let me just remind people, per year, that's 2 games. That's not a lot for a lot of people potentially. But for that 63%, where are they engaging? Where are they spending their money? And I think the most likely case is it is live service. It's free to play. That's where that money's going.
Yeah.
The market, the industry is transitioning, I think, from trying to justify making new people justify dropping $70. Instead, it's a case of, well, we can get them to spend a quarter of that amount, $5, $10, or even less on battle passes, on in-game cosmetics. So I think that, and subscriptions as well. I know Game Pass has come under a lot of fire recently, but subscriptions offer that value proposition, which is perfectly made for that larger proportion of players. The people who they don't want to buy full price games, they can get subscriptions to get games cheaper, or they can play free to play games that they can play for years. But I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting to look as someone who, and I imagine people listening might be people who do more actively buy games, and you'd think that we're not the outliers, but the data says that we clearly are.
Well, to kind of wrap up this section, I'm thinking this is new data, but some of the concepts are very old. This is no different to people going to, when Blockbuster was a thing, renting things out, playing those VHS tapes, and then sending them back when they were done with it. This is very similar, I think, of the same concept. We saw subscriptions for things like Netflix explode because of this, and now we're increasingly seeing games catch up, because I think games have been behind in that sense. So people are willing to spend that money on Games Pass and PS Plus, as we've talked about, because it kind of hides that scary looking full price.
The big investment, yeah.
The big investment. An investment is an excellent segue there, Tom, into
I knew where this was going.
Into the second story, which is, are console prices, which are rising, going to change the role that consoles play in the ecosystem? Because it's now quite a big investment to purchase a console, even what is seen as the standard, cheapest, entry-level edition of a PlayStation.
Well, we're not used to it, are we? We're really not. I when I was looking at this earlier and reading the article from Eurogamer, which was why we looked to talk about this today, it did make me think. I remember historically, you'd have the early adopters of a system who, the risk for them is they're paying full price, but they're getting that immediate access, versus 2 years down the line when there's sales and revisions and the prices are going down. But now we are seeing the opposite of that. PlayStation 5 increasing in price, the Xbox Series systems increasing in price. We're even seeing Nintendo do it. And I think obviously there's these global stakes at play, inflation, instability. If we look at the US side, tariffs have to play a part, which can drive these prices up. But I don't know where you stand, Jack, but it almost feels to me as if that's a valid reason, but it's also an excuse that platform holders are able to use to say, oh, can we make more money from hardware instead of historically hardware acting as like a loss in order to bring people into an ecosystem.
I think we're definitely seeing that they have less appetite to sell that hardware at a loss, as you said. So it's now you buy this PlayStation, what is then added on, because they're upselling you on PlayStation Plus. I wouldn't say we've ever left the era of console exclusives, but I feel that even that's gone away now because there are increasingly so many big name exclusives that are suddenly not exclusive anymore. So people who may have picked their console of choice based on what games they thought they were going to get may
we all
suddenly
did
not
that
have to
as
think
well.
about that anymore.
We all did that. That was, that was such a conversation, I feel like, for growing up. It's a case of which system are you picking for exclusives. And that did entirely drive where you went. I've ended up PlayStation purely because of exclusives and also where your friends play. But I think on the topic of exclusives, that's an interesting conversation because, again, you've got historically consoles where, say, like the PlayStation, the entirety of Sony's IP was centered around the PlayStation. It's, PlayStation Vita, PlayStation Portable, PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Pro, and that's where you got access to that content. Whereas now, as you said, you're seeing Sony do it, you're seeing Xbox do it even more aggressively. They're releasing their games on every platform. They're going for cloud. They're going for Switch, mobile.
Microsoft Flight Simulator you can play on the PlayStation, which is just.
But that's just it, isn't it?
That's
you
where
are
we are
seeing
now.
Consoles, to me, are going from being the center of that ecosystem to just being a part of it. You look at Nintendo and how aggressively they're going into film and animation. The Switch will continue to be the place where you play those games, but, and coming back to what we started with, to have that round circle moment, the pricing can be fairly inflexible because these platform holders know that realistically now they can provide so many different ways for people to access their IP and their content that people having access to the console itself doesn't matter if they're going to take a loss in order to get that person on the system, which it's interesting. I don't know if I agree or disagree with it, but the fact that we're seeing all the major players do it, there's something behind it that has to be looked at.
I think you've touched on there that the audience is changing their habits just as much as the console companies are changing habits. As you said, it's about getting that IP in different places because somebody now may never have heard of Fallout before, never thought about getting a console to play Fallout, watch the TV show on Amazon, like it, and then go, oh, there's a game? I want to play that. How do I play that? And then that's their way of discovering that this whole world exists. And then for someone who's...
Well, you think Xbox, in like that, in that context, Xbox and Fallout are synonymous for obvious reasons now. But to me, it would be interesting to see how many people look at Xbox now in that situation and wouldn't immediately think of the console and instead think of the brand. And that's definitely what Microsoft want. Microsoft, I think, will happily not kill off the Xbox Series consoles. That I don't think that's necessarily the goal right now. But you can definitely see with Xbox that they don't care for that traditional way of looking at a console. They don't look at the Xbox consoles and think, this is our flagship. This is how we get people into the hardware.
It's not a cycle anymore.
No, it's not. But that's another thing, and I'm aware we've got other stuff to discuss. But yeah, you see, you don't even have these traditional cycles of systems anymore. It feels very. This might sound funny, but I think it feels quite PC-esque to me, wherein rather than you have a new system, a new console that lasts for 7 years, you look at Sony, they launched the PS5 Pro as like a big flagship piece of more powerful hardware. But you also see that they're constantly adjusting the actual PS5s that are on the market. They're changing the models, they're changing how they work. And again, it just that seems different to me. We're kind of moving away from traditional console generations to more of a, you had the original Switch, then you had the Switch Lite, then you had the Switch OLED, and then you get the big hardware successor. Same with PlayStation, same with Xbox. But yeah, consoles.
I think the generation
I don't know.
thing is really interesting, and it's a great lead into our third story here, because this story is about a game that is no longer the flagship game for the series. It's no longer the one that had all the marketing around it, and
it never was really.
Mirage timeline.
Mirage was always like, we've made Valhalla, let's do something small, which makes
in previous
what you're
years,
about to say even more interesting, I think.
In previous years was, we have Black Flag, let's release something for the PSP because that needs a title. With Assassin's Creed Black Flag, again, let's put something else out there as kind of like a cheaper entry level one, which is Rogue. I really like Rogue. I feel it gets underappreciated, but we're talking about Assassin's Creed Mirage here, which seemingly out of nowhere has got quite a hefty DLC, and it's a free DLC, and it's quite a hefty
unheard
one,
of.
With was it like six hours at least of story content?
Yeah, I think like 6 to 10 is the line that's being presented. So
the reason why this has caused such a wave is not because it's free DLC. That's not really newsworthy. It's that it's a combination of being for an older game, being set in a region different to the main game as well. This is not Egypt. This is Saudi Arabia in modern day terms, because the public investment fund can now point to roadmaps and say, actually, we want input on this because we have the ability to do that. And so they can use an existing piece of media like Mirage, which already has an audience because people have already bought the game. And like a live service update, they can add things to that. And they are, I think, treating it as it's effectively a tourism guide. It's a way of advertising the region of Saudi Arabia that they are focusing on redeveloping. And one of the ways they can advertise that is through games. And it's not a new concept. Games have been doing it for years.
But I think in this new approach, and not to speak over you because I think you were going to say what I'm going to say. Assassin's Creed has been something in the past where, and it's not the only game, but this idea that, kind of playing the game and seeing these places, it can have some impact on tourism, especially because Ubisoft tend to do such a good job of recreating historical settings. We don't need to do the Notre Dame story again, but that's just a good example of it. This new approach feels very direct. I think there's definitely concerns around some of the things you said, Jack, in terms of the idea that you can have this state provided investment. And I think, to me, it's less about the state in question here and more about the general idea of this. I think the idea that a massive entity like a state or a government can go to a company like Ubisoft and essentially say, hey, we're going to bankroll you to make this for us. So immediately for Ubisoft, there's no risk in doing that, because you know that the cost that you put into it is nil, is zero. So anything you gain, you can chuck this out for free. It gets a bit of publicity. It gets people interested in, as you said, a 2-year-old game at this point, which feels so strange because there's been they've only released one DLC for the newest one, and yet they're coming and doing this.
And And
But
that's the question, isn't it? Is if this was a different studio and there was only one team working on a game and they were trying to support the new game, and then they were told you need to now make content for this older game. There are even just artistic questions here, because suddenly a story that has been told and seems to be chapter closed now has another bit tacked on top.
yeah, and I
seems...
think let's not act as if there's been questions around like creative autonomy and things like this in the industry for years, decades. Like this has always been a topic. So we're not acting as if this is the first time a developer might have made something they might not want to make. Let's make that very clear. And I know that's not what you're saying. But it does, again, it begs the question of, well, are we in a position now where global franchises, some of the biggest in the industry, say what you want about Ubisoft, but Assassin's Creed is a powerhouse. It always has been, and it always will be, because it's got a massive audience and it's a huge IP. Are these games now potentially not going to be made by, are they not being powered by artistic vision? Are they not being driven by that? Is it less about what the players want? Are we going to see more companies willingly turn into, geopolitical powers and such to be like, hey, give us a bunch of money, we'll make this for your game, and everyone's happy? To me, it's interesting, and I think that's why I picked this one out, because I think it's very different from we're aware, the PIF have invested into a lot of companies. They even have stakes in Nintendo, and they're on there's this EA deal going on. But this feels like an extra step to me, wherein we've gone from taking over companies at the top, and players aren't really at the moment seeing the impact of that, because I don't think it's been long enough. So now we're seeing you can go in and play this DLC in a few weeks' time, and it's directly being produced because of this situation, which feels like a next step from everything else that we've seen. We're going to just take a look through a few stories that we've seen this week, which are a bit less heavy, a bit more fun. Just a few bits that we've seen.
The rapid rundown. Do we get a cool jingle for this? Can we make a jingle for future episode?
We'll have to ask the producers. We'll say, can we have a jingle? I could sing it. I'd happily
leave a comment.
Leave a comment if you want me to sing a jingle for the rapid rundown or whatever we call this section. But yeah, the first story I picked out this week, and what going forward, we're both going to pick out stories. But I thought this week, I'm just
this week it's
them.
all you.
So Jack's got to deal with it. But I think this first one is funny. And it was an article from Games Radar that basically picked some Peter Molyneux quotes, and essentially it was just Peter Molyneux saying, "Oh yeah, I know I screwed up in the past and that I overpromised a lot, but trust me when I say that this next game that I make is going to be really good."
This is the one, guys.
Yeah, and I saw that and I just thought, Peter's not learning, but that did make me chuckle. And for reference to anyone listening, the things we discussed today, they'll all be linked in our description. So be sure to go and, as much as I think our words are good, be sure to go and check out the actual articles and support the authors and writers who bring us this kind of stuff. But yeah, Jack, hit me with the next one, because I think this one is really funny and just so Nintendo.
Well, the galaxy we live in is full of planets and stars. The Super Mario Galaxy is full of credits, apparently, because they are always loaded in the background while you're playing. And the wording here, thanks to our friends at Games Radar, inadvertently heartwarming, it was described as.
I think this is so wholesome. Just the idea that I think I don't understand game development. Look, I don't make games, but the way I understand it is there's basically just like a filter or something which stops these credits like actually appearing to the player, but across the entire game they are just there.
And this is via and this is a cracking title, Mario Trivia Enthusiast Supper Mario Broth, which is very fun wording there. So thank you to Supper Mario Broth for bringing us this little or galaxy-sized piece of trivia there.
Good. Yeah, you got to say galaxy-sized. Come on, a galactic level of just
Galaxy
Nintendoism right there. Something that's not very Nintendo like nowadays. Sorry, Nintendo. Is this weird story? There's a really big indie game in Japan called Pico Park. They've re-released a new version of it called the Classic Edition, as you do nowadays, where you remake, remaster, all these kind of
Classic
things.
move.
Yeah, that's classic in itself. That's the classic part of the Classic Edition. But somehow the developers have not only made the game free on Steam, but they can't change it, so it's just permanently free now. So, yeah.
Take advantage
of go grab yourself a bargain. Take advantage of someone else's mistake. It looks pretty cool, like from the images that I've seen. It seems cool, and hey, it's free.
It's free. I think this, with our marketing hats on, would be a really good way of owning it, because it is a mistake. There's no running from that. But if you can own it, and if the devs then did something fun with that, ran with the idea, they're going to get a lot more. They're getting more coverage than they would have. Because of 100%. This. So it's one of those where
they're just not making much money from the coverage.
That's the problem. You're going to get paid in visibility and that old thing. So it's and I think they've said as much when they posted about it on socials. If you've enjoyed what has effectively become a demo, then
if you go and play it, give a good review. For the love of God, give a good review, because they're giving you a game away for free.
Help them out.
And on the topic of potentially getting things for free, so has anyone heard of Ghost of Yotai? It's a really small Sony production. But Ghost of Yotai, as Ghost of Tsushima did, has I think Tsushima did. It has like a pet the fox mechanic. Pet the cat, pet the dog. Pet the fox. It's the same kind of thing. But the problem is the fact that it's in the game. There's now people who live in Hokkaido, which is where the game is set, who are now basically saying, well, tourists need to be careful because our foxes at the moment have a parasitic tapeworm. So if you pet the fox in Ghost of Yotai, do not go to Hokkaido and pet the foxes. That's all that I'm saying.
Make sure you're wearing suitable tapeworm-proof equipment.
Yes.
If such
things. I love the idea that that this story's just being written. Like, this is the kind of with this podcast, we will be covering like heavy stuff, like big, really important stories. But to me, there's just a place for this kind of thing where it's like,
it's the duality of the industry. If this is counting as something for Hokkaido tourism, just as much as other games can serve as tourism benefits for other industries. So
do not pet the foxes.
Do not pet the fox.
Do not pet the foxes. It's not Sucker Punch's fault if you if you pet one of the foxes.
Shout out to Automaton there for keeping us in the loop with what's going on in the Japanese games industry. They do some excellent reporting.
They do.
In English on what is happening over there.
They do.
And that's our rundown.
On that front, now we've got through the fun stuff. Now we're going to wrap things up. And
that is the rundown rapidly, and that is a wrap. Thank you for tuning into this first edition, base collector's edition, number 1 episode of the
deluxe edition.
Download. All the editions.
Wait till you see what the digital goodies are that you get for this. Trust me, they're going to be so good. It's going to be like Jack and I, but just swapping what we're wearing. So he's going to have the red and brown, and
that's the vinyl edition, some like vinyl figures of us. It'll be great. So while you wait for that, be sure you listen to more episodes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you stay ahead of the curve and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, so you never miss our super succinct summaries and the analysis, and then the little bit of fun we have at the end. But if you prefer your newsletter, your podcasting in written form, which everyone has a taste, you can also subscribe to the weekly download newsletter via LinkedIn. Or if you want even more games industry goodness, you can use the link below to sign up for our daily download, which delivers all the biggest stories in the industry right to your email inbox, and that's Monday to Friday. So you get
like
5
a pre-order.
days.
You get some of the stories before we cover them here.
Exactly. That's a great deal. And that's free as well. And that's free on purpose, not like Pico Park Classic Edition, which wasn't supposed to be free.
Well, that brings us to the end of this one. So we'll be back again next week, or straight away if you're listening to a bunch of episodes in a row. Maybe you're on a plane somewhere and you needed something to listen to on your journey to whatever games conference you are headed to next. So we will be there in some form with even more stories next week to break down and discuss. So until then, thank you for hitting play, and we will catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.